Being recorded. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Goal 6 call. Most of you know each other, but we're going to make you do the introductions anyway because we're recording it and sharing it out. And so we're going to kick off. So Goal 6 is universal support. However, you may want to view that. And I'm going to have you introduce yourselves. We'll popcorn and you call on the next person. So my question for you for the day is, what else do you support besides entrepreneurs and ecosystem building? Okay, so I'm Cecilia. I get to be your facilitator, co-facilitator, because you all are part of this. And besides entrepreneurs and ecosystem building, I'm a big advocate for equity and inclusion towards belonging. And I also advocate for women's reproductive rights. So with that, I will turn it over to Katie.
Hey everybody, my name is Katie Stanton. I'm the program director for the Urban Manufacturing Alliance. We're a national coalition of manufacturing practitioners, which are folks who support the manufacturing ecosystem by providing services and technical assistance to businesses. So other than supporting manufacturers and the people who support manufacturers, I am a co-captain of a nationally ranked ultimate Frisbee team, and the Frisbee community is actually going through a lot of growth right now around gender and racial equity, and so it's really exciting to watch how a lot of my work professionally is now dovetailing with that work in my For Fun community. You're right, popcorning. I'm going to popcorn to Beth.
You're on mute, Beth.
Thank you.
There you go.
So I'm Beth Zimmer. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I'm with the Innovation Collaborative organization, ecosystem building here. Other things that I advocate for are animal rights, love our animals, and I don't know if it's an advocate role, but I am totally a fan of music too. I'll popcorn to Dia.
Hey, my name is Dia Ghosh, and I am in Ada, Oklahoma. It is in Southeast Oklahoma, and I work with Ada Jobs Foundation, which is the economic development firm for our city, for our county. So we mainly do economic development, business retention, expansion, attraction work, and entrepreneurship. My position title is entrepreneurship specialist. So I particularly do all this stuff with helping our local businesses, helping startups, entrepreneurs, and also ecosystem building. So that's me. I am also an advocate for diversity and inclusion. I believe that being invited to the party is not enough as long as you're not asked to dance. So that's me. Okay, I'll turn it over to Hassan.
Hassan Razi, I'm in Detroit. I'm an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur supporter. I wear a variety of different hats here locally. And in terms of other things that I support, I also support musicians. A variety of different ways. I have a background on the business side in the music industry, so I'm still connected to folks in that space. And I will popcorn to Eric.
All right, Eric, you're on.
Hey there. Yeah, so let's see. Eric Renz Whitmore. I work for the city of Albuquerque in New Mexico. Diversity and inclusion is part of the, I think that are not actually part of my job specifically, but it's been a through line through about 3 different positions. The other areas that I'm working on, which are also adjacent, I guess, to ecosystem building, but it's kind of the tech space, aerospace, bio, crypto, that kind of stuff. So basically looking for new areas of potential critical mass and seeing if we can help them grow.
All right, that's everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen that has something you're probably all familiar with, which is our definition of, can you see that? The definition of universal support and the 5 things that we're putting on that. So 5 initiatives, 2 of those have briefs, and there's a couple of things that that are looming. The policy playbook, you know, we have the ESHIP playbook that's being created, but the policy playbook for ecosystem builders and entrepreneurs, that's an interesting animal. So we'll see how that goes. And then the ESHIP grants and education foundational investment. So that's kind of come up. I know that Katie and I have been working on that for some time, on and off, and there's a conversation Beth is getting involved with. So we'll be talking to, we'll be figuring out a strategy to talk to the Council on Foundations. So that's local and area foundations that we're hoping to get some feedback. We've gotten some input from Wendy Torrance over at the Kauffman Foundation that works on foundational stuff. So we'll update and help on that. The Global Awareness Campaign seems like it's kind of overlapping with storytelling as well as with the shared vision kind of thing, because I think that there's some kind of universal message that needs to come together, and then this would be more of a PSA forward-facing concept. But if anybody has energy that they'd like to put around making a case for developing templates, and then as some of you are starting to take part in larger convenings that have to do with other events, I think we can start working on some best practices of what that looks like. So if you're going to IMBIA, if you're going to the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, how should ecosystem builders partner? And you know, we'll talk about that. Now, most of you are ESHIP champions, which means that you've been working on some of this at greater depth, and have seen this community dashboard. So since there are a couple of other people, what I'm going to do is I will relink this dashboard, which is how we're going to maybe put in communication around working on these goals and initiatives, just to take a look at, so that when you're looking at this dashboard, you'll be able to, as a new person, understand what's going on around the goal calls and the initiatives and the work that we're doing. We're going to hopefully populate this with the links and such. We're working on a simple template. And then all those video recordings that we've been doing, like this one, will live here so that you can always go back and revisit them. So that's why you're being recorded, so that people that are coming to the party just a little bit later will still feel like they can get caught up. So with that, are there any questions?
Celia?
No. Yes.
Would you mind putting the link to the dashboard in the Slack channel?
Sure. I can do that.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. It's my first meeting, so I look forward to learning more about that.
Okay. So this isn't out and live. This is still being built. But this is for, you know, we have a couple of different websites that we're working on. So there is a website that we're working on that's going to house the ESHIP goals that will live on a Kaufman page. Because it lives on a Kaufman page, it goes through a much more rigorous process where wording has to be exact and things are a little bit less of a draft, although they're still a draft. And so we put in the information and we came up with a prototype that gets sent off to the public relations department, and then it goes through legal, and it goes through all of these other things. This is more, and that's more for everybody, for, you know, like the global sustainable goals for the United Nations, where everybody in the world is looking at them. That's where the ESHIP stuff will live. This is more of a dashboard for those of us who are working on initiatives to build the field. So this is more of a working page, communication channel. Slack is how you're going to engage with the groups and talking about, we don't want you to lack for tools. We don't want to put it out so that there's so many things you can't keep up. So we're trying to define those things. So if you'll look on the dashboard, it says Facebook is a continued conversation. It deepens relationships. It shares best practices. It's also a place where several hundred people who aren't day to day or week to week or month to month involved in moving this field forward. There are people that are interested in ecosystem building and curious to know what's going on. Some of them have never been to an ESHIP. Some of them are just now hearing ecosystem building and have come onto the site. The Slack channel is, and we like Slack because it's easier to refer back to. If you start emailing each other, then we have this issue that Katie and Beth and I are having right now, which is, oh my gosh, where did that email go? Right? So that we can refer back to it. And so Slack is an easier channel to maintain all the working information, sharing articles, working on best practices and things like that. It's good to be able to put, as we're calling it, a straw person model out there and then have people weigh in and share Google Docs and stuff like that. So does that all make sense? Is there anything you're missing? We're trying to hit all of those things. Is there anything that we're missing in making sure that we have the tools and the communication channels that we need?
Celia, can you add me to the Slack channel? I don't think I'm
Yes.
on it.
I can absolutely add you to the Slack channel.
Thank you.
I usually, when I send the emails out for the working calls and things like Slack, I usually try not to add people or to show everyone's email until you've had this interaction. I think it's a little awkward, personally, to get emails from people you have no idea who they are or, you know, what they're about, and then all of a sudden they're emailing you with all this information and you're like, wait, who are you? So so that's just a practice. So everybody gets BCC'd on the first one. As we put together the recording, you've interacted, you've seen each other's faces now. You're a little more comfortable to go, oh yeah, that's that person. So so I will definitely add you to the Slack channel. Anything else? So what is this looming question of what is universal support? Because we talk about universal support in expanding the external understanding and support of the ecosystem building field. And I know that we go back and forth on this is our message and reach out to others, but I think that there's a nuance and that's a lot of what Dia's working on right now with her upcoming summit, is showing the people in the community that they're actually part of the ecosystem, right? They've just not heard the term before. I think, Eric, I use you as an example often, so don't be scared, but But Eric lives in this world where he works in traditional circles, right? And so how hard is it to talk to people, use the word entrepreneur or ecosystem building and things like that? I mean, do you get a lot of pushback? What's your experience?
So I'd say we did, and we still do among some groups. So there was a pretty substantial effort where city organizations and grassroots were pretty aligned, coming about 5 years ago, give or take. And that led to a fair amount of press and a few accelerators. So there was a lot of kind of news going out, and it was hitting a lot of different people throughout the community, letting them know. And this is, I would say, primarily more about startup entrepreneurship and tech innovation kind of stuff. So under that tech innovation umbrella. So having said that, there were a lot of people that were not really connected with in that effort. So a lot of the different pockets of town that were doing more traditional business, underinvested parts of our community that were not really part of that conversation. So I'd say, I'm not sure. I'll say that I think we did a pretty good job of reaching the potential tech entrepreneurs or the people who are already kind of in that space or potentially. And it was very much framed in a way of community and ecosystem. I think there are a lot of folks that were not part of that, and that's kind of the ongoing challenge for me and a number of groups, is reaching them. And I think it's also the other thing that I'd say is there are a lot of folks who resist the idea of the word entrepreneurship. And when you talk about startups and your conversation is all about venture funding, for great reasons, that does not appeal to a lot of folks and actually distances them. It makes them feel like they're, almost excluded intentionally. So that's the challenge of taking the route that we took and that we're kind of trying to correct course on at this point. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a bit of my journey.
No, I think that hits home with a lot of people. So I feel like the whole conversation, between Shark Tank and talk of unicorns and the whole Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs thing, it's been a plus and a detriment to our livelihood. Hassan, when you talk to people about being an entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur, how, especially in a place that's been, Detroit's been full of entrepreneurs, right? But when you look at the auto industry now, that's old school, that's industrial age, that's manufacturing and things. How is the word entrepreneur looked upon in your environment?
To a certain extent. So with startups, it's still looked at as they're not quite legitimate yet. And I think as far as the auto industry goes, so Ford has been rebranding themselves as a mobility company. So now they're looked at as like on the cutting edge of where things are going. I know GM and Chrysler are in a different place, but Ford just relocated to a space downtown in Detroit, and they were in the suburbs, so they're basically rebranding themselves as a mobility company. So they have initiatives that are around biking, around a whole bunch of other things. So they're trying to distance themselves from being looked at as an automaker, and they're in a sense rebranding themselves as a mobility company. So all forms of mobility are what they're looking at for the future. But most of the folks that I've interacted with are still in the traditional mindset of economic development. So startups and entrepreneurs, like the word entrepreneur just means somebody that's not yet, in their eyes, a legitimate or a viable business. So there is still that disconnect. Thinking like I was looking at the initiatives under this goal, and I know there's the whole like education piece of educating people about entrepreneurship and ecosystem building. And there is an area about policy, but I'm thinking there's something specific that needs to be in here about reaching out to folks in traditional economic development, because their support is going to be like universal support. Like we have the foundation piece under this goal, and then there's the whole bit about policy and having a toolkit to educate ecosystem builders. But I'm wondering if there needs to be like something specific under this, because basically for this to be successful, like you have to get, and Eric would know more about this, but like you have to have the support of those in traditional economic development. I'm just wondering like how that piece would fit under this goal, like in a very specific and intentional way. I hope that, does that make sense?
No, it does. And I think that's what Beth had spoken about early on in conversations around working group calls. I mean, back in like, I want to say October or November, Beth, that we were talking about this, global awareness campaign, a PSA for that. And I think we have to start a new campaign because we've been overwrought with the reality show version of what entrepreneurship, you know, the rogue Wild West kind of thing. And I think we need to, at least, we can't fix the idea of entrepreneur because I know everybody's taken that on, but I think ecosystem builder is something that's attainable. What do you think, Beth?
Totally agree. And it's interesting, you know, we've been successful to the point here in getting the community rallied around the notion of entrepreneurship being really important. And the word ecosystem is being used all over the place, which is awesome. But what's interesting to me is that the economic developers that have been in the game for 10 or 20 years, they don't see themselves as ecosystem builders, and they don't see themselves as working in our lane. And we need to bridge that gap where we're all, you know, working towards that same goal of building and improving the ecosystem. And from the PSA perspective, absolutely. And again, it goes back to that question about SourceLink and the group in the Federal Reserve working with IEDC on legitimizing a true certification for an ecosystem builder. You know, once those things start happening, and there's national billboards and commercials coming out of what entrepreneurship, why it's important, and why entrepreneurial ecosystem building is important, our lives will become so much easier. And I can see it, I can envision it. It's just like, how the heck do we get there? I know doing it just for one community, in the marketing that we had to engage in, it was over $100,000 a year, and that was just for one community. So to do that on a national or even global scale is going to be significant. But I know where there's a will, there's a way. So we just have to do it. And I should be writing a brief about that, right?
No, that should be, yes. Yes, you should write a brief about that, but I think we're all here to help with that. I think we started that with the last ESHIP summit, where between sustainable work and this universal support. And I think it was, I don't remember if it was Shelley Bell or Felicia Hatcher who said we should just go on our LinkedIn and write ecosystem builder, right? So now you're making it more public. So now I it felt awkward for a while when I would introduce myself and say I'm an ecosystem builder, and people look at me funny. And like I said, my aunt still thinks I work in the environment, but that's okay because I kind of do. But then I was at a networking thing, or I was at a board meeting, and somebody said I'm a matchmaker, and I thought, wow, you don't hear that very often, And so she was totally comfortable with saying, I'm a matchmaker. Why do I feel awkward about saying ecosystem builder? So, all of that goes to, but I'm curious because to ask Katie, your field is definitely one where it's got history. I mean, and industrial age and manufacturing and all of that has always been around entrepreneurs, right? But I don't think they feel that way. So what do you see? And plus you're a woman in manufacturing. So, and Lee, and, so tell us about that.
Yeah, I think there is like a historical bias against manufacturers for being traditional and sort of not understanding a more like approach to economic development through ecosystem building and equitable development. But, you know, and I live in Wisconsin, and we had that terrible Foxconn deal that went through that gave like a $3 billion tax incentive for 10,000 jobs that now does not exist in any way, shape, or form. So I see that on a real basis. But I think where ecosystem building really comes in to manufacturing is a couple levels. I think one, manufacturers are at their core ecosystem builders through supply chain work. They all have to cultivate their own supply chains and keep those people there and find new ones when their old suppliers go away or all of that. So in a way that they already have that built into their DNA, they just have never called it that before. And then I think from an entrepreneurial side, you know, manufacturing is changing. So it's not Foxconn LCD TV production with 10,000 jobs. It's a beverage or food producer with 20 jobs, or it's a mom and pop machine shop that's been there for 50 years that's looking to transition or change ownership, but still create opportunity for their employees. And so the entrepreneurship still exists, I think, really strongly. And then you have the maker movement too. So where tech and innovation and design are really meeting manufacturing and creating a new generation, they're steeped in entrepreneurship. And so I think you have all these people who are working under sort of the bigger name of manufacturing. But I think once they start understanding how to connect the dots, they really can see themselves as ecosystem builders, both in entrepreneurship, but also for their own community and their own companies and their own future.
That's great. Dia, what are your thoughts in hearing all of this? You ride that between the city, so between what Eric does and between what Katie does and all of that.
Okay, this is definitely a good information. But yes, like I said, I work in traditional economic development, and actually my position was a new position title. We did not have an entrepreneurship specialist before. We had small business coordinators at our tech center, but with our new, like my boss, entrepreneurship and innovation is just a priority. We are also seeing that we are part of like the governor's economic development marketing team. And I just saw their agenda yesterday, and entrepreneurship and innovation is number one on the list. So that is really good to see. I totally agree with the fact that ecosystem building, the word just is, I think it is a buzzword right now, but just sending out that education on what it really is, and those who are already doing it, but they just don't recognize it. But I just think starting small, like one person like me who can, you know, start getting gapping the bridge between economic development and entrepreneurship. And I feel like there's several others. The OMA in Oklahoma, they are part of the Oklahoma Innovation System. So we have OCAST, those who do the research part of it, that we have manufacturing, and they also collaborate with the New Product Development Center. So that is an ecosystem right there, and they're doing such a great job. So I think just sending that message is what's important.
So it seems like, you know, this global awareness campaign is, it almost feels like a PSA where people uncover that they are part of the ecosystem building team, right? So we're all on the same team. We have different titles, but we're all doing the same thing, right? So if you're helping your community thrive, whether you are whether you're in government, whether you're in an innovation tech thing, or education, or whatever, that I could just visualize, like Beth said, there's like some ad out there where you go, I'm an ecosystem builder. I'm an ecosystem builder. Well, what do you do? Well, I do this, and I'm an ecosystem. So it's not, you know, entrepreneurship has been, and communities like 1 Million Cups, I've often said, it's the first place that I've gone where they say, that's a great idea, and not, that's a great idea, but. So, so if you say, that's a great idea, and you're probably an ecosystem builder, right? if you've connected people and had nothing to gain from it, you're an ecosystem builder. So those are things that go into it. What does a campaign look like? Does it mean that there are there's ad space? I mean, Beth, tell us about how you went around and how you utilized $100,000 to create this message.
So we first strategized around, you know, the reason we needed to do it and who we needed to reach. And at the end of the day, it was like, we have to reach everybody. Everyone needs to understand, from the middle school student all the way up to the senior citizen, why it's important, because we need them to put pressure on or be inclined to vote for the people that are going to make policy that is supportive of increasing entrepreneurship. So the message had to get to everybody about the entrepreneurship is important and why. And hey, anyone out there with an idea, guess what? There's a whole plethora of resources out here standing ready to help you. And so we figured that out, and then we worked with our TV stations. We worked with our billboard company. We are all over social media. We have a 5,000 member list in MailChimp that we send communications out to. It was just the whole basket, right, of things that you can do to reach the broad audience. And it has been pretty successful in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, 3 years, and it's an important thing now in our community for sure. But it has to be sustained as well. And that's right now. How do you do that?
So is there something that's written out on the steps that you took?
Yeah, we have our marketing strategy that we put together a few years ago, and I'm thinking of starting with that as a draft brief kind of thing.
That would be great. That would be absolutely fabulous. And then trying to figure out how everyone fits into that. So as Christine engages national resource providers to be able to say, so what chunk of that can you take on, right? Yeah. So when foundations like Knight, who's involved in publishing, can take on that piece of it and throw that into stuff that they print, or we'll engage Warren Buffett. I don't know. Whatever that looks like, there's got to be some messaging. What do you think is the low-hanging fruit? I know Peter Kritikos, who has been on calls before, he works in traditional economic development. And he said he feels like it's trying to find your ambassadors. Like Dia was saying, it's the bridge makers, right? So it's somebody who understands entrepreneurship and ecosystem building, but works in that traditional. And so finding more people like Eric, right? You go, oh, so when somebody from the city of Tulsa reached out to me and started talking about entrepreneurship, I said, hey, great, I'm going to connect you with Eric. And so, Eric, how did that, can you share how that conversation went? Or you have more of those conversations than most people we know.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but I think the thing and it's like the first time you come. Has everyone at this group been to the ESHIP conference, ESHIP summits? Okay, so if you haven't been, and groups like I don't know, back when Startup Weekend was doing their things with Up Global and Startup Champions Network and 1 Million Cups. When those kinds of convenings happen, a lot of folks come together who have not necessarily met people who've done the same role. And I think that's really important to reinforce, that there are other people out there that are doing similar work, and that there are these evolving networks to help connect and support those folks. So I think in a lot of ways, each of us is probably doing a lot of good things, but it's sometimes useful to have another person to kind of bounce that off of, to kind of share, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Have you done something similar? What kind of problems have you run into? Are there some new ideas? So I wouldn't say that we've done some things we're proud of, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily innovative. But I think it's very useful sometimes to have people in a similar role. And I think since government is sort of, feeders, not leaders. So Brad Feld kind of kept us all at arm's length. We're not allowed to participate. So some groups have been kind of held at arm's length, to be able to have a communication with those folks and say, no, there's plenty of us doing this kind of stuff, but it's good to have those conversations and reinforce that, we're doing the right thing oftentimes, and maybe that there's some ways we can tweak what we're doing and learn from the wisdom of others.
I think all of us have shared that epiphany moment when you walked into a room and they were talking about this thing and you said, oh, that stuff that I do, that's a thing. And then you're like, oh, and so I've heard so often, these are my people, right? It's like walking into the room and going, I found my people. I found the person who understands why I do what I do, because they do similar things. And I don't know how you put that into a global awareness campaign or put that into a set of best practices, but that's what I feel like if we could package that up and just share it, that's probably what we need to work on. So I don't know if whoever wrote Global Awareness Campaign had that in mind, but I think that spreading the word is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm getting some head nods, so we must be on the right track. Now the other one, which I think is fairly approachable, is that partnering in large convening events, because we all attend events and functions, and we're just now starting to see this ecosystem building component. And the thing that's coming up in April, which I'm going to hope to get some of you to, is the Tom Tom Festival. The Tom Tom Festival is taking place in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the reason it's called the Tom Tom Festival, I just discovered, was because it's Thomas Jefferson's birthday. So that's what Tom Tom's all about. So the Tom Tom Festival, like almost every day of their festival has the word ecosystem in it. It's like creative ecosystem and civic innovation ecosystem. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So as people embrace the word ecosystem, I think we've got to get away from using the terms archaic, out of date, old-fashioned when we talk about economic development. Well, we will alienate those people that are already in those positions because they will want to hold on to things so tightly that you'll never be able to make headway. Anybody have any thoughts on 6.2, the make the case, develop a set of templates everyone can use?
I do.
Okay, great.
I thought that actually seemed like some low-hanging fruit from a tactical perspective. Like, I think a global awareness campaign is really exciting and would be amazing to sort of coordinate, but sort of launching off of Beth's model, Beth, how you like activated your community with like $100,000 is a lot of money, but it's not what it would take to, it's not what it would take to do a global awareness campaign. So I can imagine like something we do at UMA a lot is toolkits. So we pull in best practices from a bunch of different communities and we say, here's how, Tulsa, Detroit, and Sacramento are approaching this challenge. And, here's maybe something you could do too. So maybe there's a hybrid model of 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3, I guess, where, we create how to do some like promotion around ecosystem, being an ecosystem builder and doing ecosystem building for your local community. And so people like Eric and Dia, who work in city government, can say, hey, here are like 4 strategies other cities are employing, and I could do that too here for either a low budget or no budget or whatever that looks like. So I could see a toolkit being like a stepping stone towards that global awareness campaign.
That totally makes sense. And I feel like there are several people that we know that are in the community that could definitely work on doing that, right? So Reagan Hales comes to mind, who's a startup champion, and she's with Economic Development Amarillo. And maybe I mean, I almost think that if we clustered regionally, that it may be something that's or is it a cross section of, because we always hear, or we hear often, oh well, that's what they do in big cities, or that's what rural does. It's not what we all do, right? So there's always the us and them until you put all of those things together and you go, oh, well, yeah, I guess it is kind of the same.
Yeah, I'll just some stuff that's come up. I think over on the what is it, the data one, quantitative measures and all that. I think two different responses. One is there's a desire to have a model to begin with and then fit everything into that model. In some ways, there's so many things going on that I just want to start putting stuff onto a page and have some folders. And once we start doing that, we can kind of do that process where you kind of, I forget what it's called in website development, where you basically kind of put the different structures in place so you can find stuff. I almost want to take that approach versus coming up with a model you know to be wrong and then working on it. So, but I will also say that I think that one of the items that in that goal is collecting different methods for creating and finding data and how we actually use it. And I think this kind of goes along with that in terms of how do we collect these different case studies and other kinds of materials that we can share with potential ecosystem builders so they can shop around. Once we start having that, I think it's good to have, whether it's keywords or something else, some other way of helping our entrepreneurs find those.
Yeah, and I think this might not exactly be what you're talking about, Eric, but Beth and I have been working on around Initiative 6.1, a repository for policies that both support and do not support entrepreneurship and ecosystem building. And the idea was to put it out to this group and hopefully a larger audience, so they could fill in all the different policies that, or like programs or supportive actions or non-supportive actions that are being implemented in cities or rural areas or whatever that looks like. And then the idea would be to, cull it from there and really pull out some of the things that are really strong or really productive. Beth, I think that lives in a folder in some drive. I can't remember where, but Celia, I'll share it with you.
And then I guess what we can do is we have to figure out what, and we're hoping some of this is the dashboard. Some of it lives in the ESHIP Champions dashboard because you're all kind of the caretakers of all of those things collectively. But I just put into the chat, this is something that Andy had talked about, needing to have something put together. So it's kind of like Marketplace, but it's more of a platform where we'll be able to share some of those things. And we don't actually know what it looks like, but he says, most of the communications that he gets on a daily basis is the need for journals and podcasts and all of that. So that's being taken. So storytelling is part of that. And so Jeff, Bennett, Tyler, Avery, myself, a couple of us are working on some of that, where we're trying to create a repository of the stories. And alongside that is what Eric mentioned about the quantified methods, because they want to collect case studies and research. But it seems like what's top is there needs to be some kind of platform or channel where we're able to incorporate some of this, so it is searchable. And there's a way to put, so isn't it like the theme that just kept coming up over and over again is like the wiki of ecosystem building. So we just need something, and then everybody says, well, if it doesn't live on something like wiki, then it doesn't exist. So we obviously have to create it so that we can exist as a field. I don't know, but yeah, there's something around this. There's something around Marketplace. There's something around a good communication method. And I don't know if it's out there or it needs to be built. There's a guy who's working on some ecosystem app. I think it's bigger than an app, because I don't know that I don't know that an app is going to get you all the things that you need. Like, what does that look like? What would it have to have? So we've already talked about searchable. We've shared. I don't know. There's other things. What do you see, Eric?
In my I wonder, like, what, to the extent that folks have got sort of a community of practice that they actually work with already, what models do you see working with that you've found most useful? I think the organization that I go to most often these days that I'm really impressed with is a thing called ELGL, which is Emerging Local Government Leaders. So that has a lot of different folks, different aspects of government, a lot of civic tech stuff, which is my jam. But they have podcasts, they have sort of regular events that they try to push out to encourage people in the community to do, but they've also got a ton of resources that are available on their website. So I think in a way you have to marry that engagement piece where you're getting that regular engagement between people who are part of the community, but also some people, if you're not driving them there with some kind of content that they're going to look at and maybe to help them discuss, you lose out on the community. So I think you kind of need to have both. And a lot of chicken and egg kind of stuff. But I think until you have that repository or something to draw people to, today we're discussing policies that have worked for entrepreneurs across the country. Great. Until you've got those two pieces, I think you're always kind of weak on one side.
There's an organization out of DC called Local Progress, which is a sort of community practice isn't quite the right group, but it's an organization that focuses on putting out policies that progressive local officials can use in their own communities, localprogress.org. And UMA has written a couple of policy briefs for them around like industrial and artisanal zoning and capital access for manufacturers. But what I like about it is like it's for a very specific niche group, which I think could be applied to like the ecosystem builder definition. So it's like it's very explicit for who is who can use it or who would be interested in using it. I don't think they do like webinars or anything like that. I know they do a conference once a year, but I think it's like kind of like Eric was saying, it's like a balance of like, how do you get people to participate in something? And how do you like give them a carrot to say, here's something I'll give you for free. So then you can get them to do it later. Which I think is like, obviously Local Progress is a whole organization that's dedicated just to putting out these policies. So like when you think of something as big as this ESHIP initiative or like goals and initiatives, it comes a little bit more daunting, but they're a really cool sort of example that I could see, it making sense to look like.
What you got, Beth?
What? Honestly, I look to you guys. I didn't know about ELGL and I didn't know about Local Progress, so I look forward to learning more. Eric, do you have a website for emerging government leaders? Are you chatting it? On a side note, one app that I would like to see developed is an app. So one of the tools that we built for our region is a entrepreneurial ecosystem asset map. And it's clickable on our website where they can go on there and look and see about all the different organizations in an 8-county area that exist to, at least in part, if not in full, to support entrepreneurs. They can click on those, find out what they do, but it's clunky. And it would be nice to have an app that was like a map that people could say, okay, I'm looking for prototype support, I'm looking for funding, I'm looking for XYZ, and the map would pop up for them to tell them exactly who, where, and how to get a hold of them. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think we also talked about, as people are traveling, to be able to connect is something else that would be interesting. Like, what are the ecosystem building events or the entrepreneurial events in this city that I'm going to? So I'm coming to visit Eric in Albuquerque and saying, okay, now I have to rely on Eric and Vanessa to entertain me, which I'm very happy to do. But also I know that they have other stuff to do during the day, so to be able to find stuff. Yeah.
I had a question for Beth. The asset mapping, is that something that your organization did privately, or was that an initiative with your Commerce, Department of Commerce, or the state?
Yeah, so what we did was we got a grant from the state to look at our entrepreneurial ecosystem and tell us, are we behind or are we okay? And if we're not okay, then help us develop a scope of work to change our situation for the better. So as part of our work plan with the experts that came in and assessed our ecosystem, they developed that map. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
And I think that there are organizations that are doing that. Startup Genome is one of them, and Arnobio, who used to work at Kaufman, is part of Startup Genome. But I've heard of some other groups, and I know I have faith and confidence and knowledge because I have a relationship with Arnovio. But now I wonder about all the people that are popping up to do this. Like, we'll map your ecosystem, because that's the cool thing to do. And so that's where this whole standards board that we talk about comes up, and how important that seems to be, where we're looking at making sure that what we offer out or what we endorse, as not we as in the Kauffman Foundation or the ESHIP community, but the ESHIP community. So is it members of SCN and IMBIA and members at large, and representation, kind of like a UN-esque organization, where we go, yeah, this is the bar, this is what we'd like to see, and then the standards that we like to see include these things, and these are given the thumbs up by members of this organization, kind of thing. But representative of what's out there. So, because how else do you prevent from having the bad players, right? And so that's challenging. But anyway, I don't know how much we solved. I think that there's some obviously some work towards those efforts. I will add Dia to the Slack channel, and if there's anything that you can think of, please feel free to reach out. I'm gonna follow this up with the link to this video for you and anybody else, and you'll have everyone's email addresses. Most of you already do. And so closing out, what can we do? It's more about support. It's more about you talk about universal need. Beth, did you have something that you wanted to share?
I wanted to ask you, Celia, if going back to when there's a new emerging industry or a new emerging profession, and there's different actors popping up claiming to provide services and setting the bar, et cetera. I just wanted to go back to, I don't think this question's been answered yet. Techstars is starting to enter the field of ecosystem building. And is Kaufman in conversations with them? Are they in lockstep, or do they know about the ESHIP community?
Yeah, there are Techstars people that are involved in ESHIP, where they're not as active as some others, but Techstars has been to ESHIP, or Techstar members have been to ESHIP, and they've been involved. Does that answer your question?
I don't know. I've been trying to figure out what are they trying to feed their deal flow, because they're on the lookout all the time for high growth potential entrepreneurs to enroll into their accelerator programs, right? So
Right.
if that's their goal, that's great. But that leaves out potentially all of the other entrepreneurial activities that aren't necessarily classified as high growth potential. So I don't want it. It's so early in the immersion of all of her, in the introduction of all of this. I just hate to add more confusion, but I don't know that we have any control over that. So just something.
I think I feel like maybe trying to look at it as that's just a single facet of what ecosystem building is about, right? I mean, we have all these different lenses that we look at. I met a Hindu prophet one time who was talking to me about interfaith stuff and different religions, and so her explanation to me about faith was that if you take most of the religions in the world and you think about the morals and the values and things that they hold sacred, and you put that all together, they're very similar, right? I mean, a lot of the world's religions sprouted from the Abrahamic faiths, and so not all of them are exactly the same, but the things that they value, be good to people, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, that kind of stuff, is in the core of everything. The thing is that I look at it from my view, in my facet, right? So I'm looking at this facet, and you're looking at the same kinds of things from your lens, and so I thought it was a really interesting way to explain interfaith. And if I took ecosystem building and I said, this is what ecosystem builders do, you may call it something else. You may think that it only has to do with this, but I would introduce the idea that it's only a portion of what's out there. And so I think the whole idea of universal support is that we look at this as just part of this whole big thing that's greater than us, right? So with that, a word to close. So I will have you start, Beth. Give us a word to close.
Have a fantastic week. Can't wait to see all of you sometime soon. Hassan?
Wow, I'm stuck for words right now, Celia. I've been talking all morning and I feel like I can't think of a word. Yeah, I'm just
Speechless.
speechless. That's the word. Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, sort of optimistic, I think. I like talking to people across the country about what's going on and figuring out how we're going to all move it forward together. Dia?
My word would be excited. I'm like that new person who's right now like trying to just get all the information. When Celia, you mentioned about the epiphany moment, about realizing, finding your people. I think that was my first conversation with you on the Zoom call. So thank you for that, and I'm excited to see everybody soon as well. Pass it on to Eric.
I'm having some badass coffee this morning, so I'm just going to say you're all badasses. I love working with people who are rolling up their sleeves and doing important work. That's why I'm so jazzed to be working with you. So ready to get to work. It's Monday. I don't know. It's still morning for me, so good luck to everyone.
And I feel very united. So thank you so much for your time. And I will send this out to you probably after I get to Kansas City. So we'll see you all soon. Have a good week.
Drive safe, Celia.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.